Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Big Pop Podcast, the premier progressive pro wrestling podcast where we explore the intersection of wrestling and leftist ideals. I am one of your hosts for the show, Navthepoet, and as always, joining me is my amazing co host, Sully. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
Wonderful.
Excited for today's episode.
Yeah, we got an interesting topic. It's about the transition between the NXT and main roster journey when NXT wrestlers get called up. And I think the best place to start is with some of the most recent call ups, specifically Roxanne Perez and Julia.
Whoa.
What are you feeling about this?
I I think they're doing okay by Roxanne.
Sure.
She's involved in the story. I feel like they wasted her at WrestleMania, but that's a
Yeah.
whole other thing. And Julia, I'm just like, I'm scared she's gonna get the Shinsuke treatment. I'll be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been cool with Roxanne's treatment so far
Mhm.
because I think this was her third year in the Rumble. Um,
Oh,
and then sort of after that, they slowly like transitioned her by having her enter into the Elimination Chamber, which she had a pretty good showing.
yeah,
Like you said, unfortunately, it wasn't on Mania, but she was at a Stand and Deliver, even though it was like a
yeah,
pre-show tag match or something like that. But they kind of like were wrapping up her NXT time and moving her, which I like. Like there doesn't always need to be that hard,
yeah.
from one brand to the next. You can, if they're willing, you
Uh,
can put them on
Yeah,
both shows and let
yeah,
them have multiple stories. It makes their time interesting, and it also makes the fans probably check out more of the content,
yeah,
right? Like if you want someone to watch NXT, it's like, oh well, she's feuding with Bailey, and Bailey's going to be on NXT. Now I got to check out
true,
NXT.
true.
So I think in that way it works pretty well. I am weary about what they're seeming to be doing with her, which is having some sort of alliance with the Judgment Day.
I guess she's got the personality that will fit a heel faction. She's far superior as a heel, and I think she's got the acting chops enough for a wrestler to be able to be that like kind of mean girl that you need for a Finn Balor heel faction.
Yeah, yeah, I guess if the intention is to split them
Yeah.
properly and have Finn and Finn be with Roxanne, that could be
Mhm.
interesting. I just think she was doing fine on her own.
Yeah.
So I didn't even see the need to team her with Julia in the first place.
I feel like teaming her with Julia was just meant to be a just a plot device to get them onto, the main roster and there to kind of be a reason for it because they don't like Stephanie, so they stalked her to Raw to beat her up.
Hmm.
And that's kind of the only reason because they split them up, what, this week, last week, sorry,
Yeah,
on
it's
Raw.
in the last week, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit weary with Julia just because
Yeah.
obviously we've had a conversation before. You should check out our previous podcast episodes where they don't super push non-English first language wrestlers, even though they're maybe getting a little bit better. And even with what they're doing with Julia, I feel like she's not the center of attention when a wrestler of her caliber should be. So she's in a triple threat match this weekend, as of recording, where I think the focus of that match is going to be what they're doing with Charlotte. And
Ah.
I think maybe Julia will win that match, but not because they're like, here's Julia, because there are other things going on in that match, and Julia is just going to pick up the win.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find it strange. I think Roxanne was also in a qualifier match this week.
Yes.
I don't know if she won that. Um, but I just I find it so weird. There's a weird thing with the way they do it because it happens pretty much every year after Mania, there are a couple of
Mm.
call-ups that also tend to coincide with releases, which I don't think that's a
Yeah.
coincidence.
Yeah, I think it's them being like out with the old, in with the new, you know.
Right.
It's that meme from Toy Stories where Andy drops Woody. It's like, I
Mm,
don't want to play with you anymore.
yeah.
And so they just fill the slots with the new wrestlers, which like you don't need to do that. You could kept the old wrestlers if you actually valued them, and then used them to help these new wrestlers if need be.
Right.
But
I mean, it's very what's the word? Callous the way
mhm,
they go about it because it feels like they don't actually value and care about these individuals and
mhm,
these unique characters. It's just you're filling a slot. It's very
yeah,
you're just replacing a broken cog as they
yeah,
perceive it. I don't think these wrestlers are broken cogs, but I think that
mm,
that's kind of how they view it. Like, oh, this wrestler isn't getting over, it's not doing anything. They're I think Triple H was quoted as like dead weight. I think I read an article that he labeled it.
oh,
I could be wrong, but I mean,
yikes,
I'll have to double check that. And if I do find it, I will post it on screen.
mhm,
Um, but yeah, so it's like, okay, we're getting rid of that and then just filling the new space with
mhm,
something new that at the time has a lot of buzz, especially with NXT because like,
mhm,
and that's one of the differences is that NXT is a um recurring audience,
yeah,
right? And NXT has a recurring audience, pretty much the same people most of the time, or a good majority of the same people,
mm,
and it's smaller. It's like
much smaller.
500 people,
Yeah,
maybe. The arena is smaller, the audience is smaller, so everything feels more not just intimate, but the reactions feel bigger because
yeah.
it's being, housed in a smaller space. And so they get over there, and the WWE just thinks, oh, okay, we should just bring them up, with usually it seems no plan.
Yeah, it's so strange that a company that seemingly is all about let's look at the data, let's look at the analytics to see what's going to happen. They don't actually do that for their NXT wrestlers. They are kind of relying on them getting over as fast as possible when they bring them up to main,
Yeah,
or that the NXT crowd are going to follow them to thing. To be honest, if they were smart, whenever they did a call up, they should do it in Florida, where it's a little bit more likely you're going to have people who know who these wrestlers are. But it's kind of the case with Julia in particular, if we're talking about the recent call ups, where Julia gets amazing reactions in NXT, whereas on main roster, I kind of feel like she's not getting that. I suppose also it goes to the no plan thing where she was a babyface, maybe a tweener if you want to push it in NXT, and then you call her up to Raw as a heel, like straight up heel. I mean, she can do it. She looks awesome as a heel, but it's like there's another disconnect here where it's like you've got her coming out to beat up someone who again is on NXT on Raw, where it's
right,
like, okay, I guess Stephanie is over on TikTok and YouTube, but is she over in the crowd?
right. Yeah, it's weird because they go off reactions, but I feel like they often overestimate
Yeah.
these wrestlers um like how well they're known outside of
Hmm.
the hardcore fan base, which
Yeah.
is especially confusing when we know they've been pursuing the casual audience so
Hmm.
much. That's why Logan Paul and that's why like all these other big viral moments are the focus because it's like, oh, how do
Exactly.
we get the attention of the casual people? So then it's very mixed because like, okay, we want the attention of the casual people, but then we're also going to showcase these wrestlers that majority hardcore fans only know about.
Mm.
Like I didn't
Yeah.
even know about Julia or Stephanie until maybe 6 months
Yeah.
ago, right? When there were
Literally,
rumblings of
exactly.
them
Yeah.
joining WWE. Because I'm someone who only watches WWE, I admit
Mm.
it. And I kind of pay attention to the peripherals of things
Yeah.
going on elsewhere. But I didn't know about them other than through friends and then through the rumblings and rumors. And so if I, someone who loves wrestling and like watches it consistently, doesn't know, why would you expect someone who tunes in casually to know about these people?
Exactly.
It would have made more
Exact.
sense for Julia to attack Io. And I'm not saying they
hmm
should have, but if you wanted to introduce her to the main roster, you have Julia attack Io.
And I don't fully remember if commentary spoke about this, but Julia and Io have a link. Io is Julia's what's the word? The other way around is Julia is Io's protege.
Right.
So they have a link there, but I don't think.
I
But
think they
again,
did mention it.
okay.
Maybe I could be wrong,
But like
but
her motivation wasn't attacking Io, it was
yeah,
attacking Stephanie, and Io was there,
right,
which didn't really make sense. And
right,
like you mentioned, it's as someone who did know Julia and Stephanie because I watch mostly wrestling outside of WWE, why are they pursuing me when I'm not going to be the kind of audience that you want when you want the general audience? For a massive conglomeration which is happy to underpay its staff and its wrestlers, they seemingly don't put too much effort into marketing their wrestlers until the wrestler gets over organically, which is something that hurts NXT call-ups because, if you aren't someone who managed to break out, say, a Joe Hendry who went viral for a meme, people aren't going to know him in
right,
general, and it's your responsibility to market these wrestlers to get them over, which is where I see a lot of the wrestlers having failed because it's a catch-22 where let's say Carmelo got called up, he wasn't marketed properly by WWE, so he wasn't getting the reactions. And so he
right,
doesn't get the reactions, WWE doesn't do anything with him, and they don't do anything with him, so he doesn't get reactions.
right.
On
Like,
main, obviously.
right. But I mean, Carmelo's a great example, right? Because he's a guy who was super over in NXT,
hmm
and really got to showcase all his talents. And people were saying this is one of the next, future stars, and he still
Yeah.
could be. He still absolutely could be.
hmm
But he's been up for a year now. We just recalled that he got
Yeah.
called up last year after Mania. And what can you recall that he's actually done?
He lost a lot of matches.
Yeah,
I think he might have lost to R-Truth in a match.
that might be right. And
Yeah.
he had a seven best of seven series with Andrade, which is
Yeah.
cool, but like it
Yeah.
doesn't do anything, and he hasn't been on any PLEs that I can remember. And so the fact that they just called him up, and I didn't even remember this, but he did have a match with Cody to a losing effort, which is fine, but
Yeah.
it's like that's not the best impression you can make.
hmm
If he was booked better since then, I would be like, okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. That's a fine intro. But he hasn't been, like they should have done. I know you don't watch NXT too much, but like
hmm
before his like big takeover matches or whatever, I guess they're also PLEs now. He would have like this whole graphic thing where there'd be jerseys that show up with all
Yeah.
the people's names that he's beaten, right?
I used to tune in just for Carmelo, to be honest.
So you could have introduced him by doing that, but with like all his accolades, right? So like
Mm.
breakout, tournament winner. I think he's two-time NXT, maybe whatever, one-time North
Yeah.
American champion or two-time, whatever it is. You just have all his accolades on these different
hmm
jerseys. Like then you're telling the audience like this is a big deal. This guy is someone you need
Mm.
to pay attention to just based on presentation, right? Where you
Yeah.
look at someone like Braun Breaker. I
Woof
really
woof.
I really don't like talking about this guy, but like he's there. I'm gonna be talking about him for the next 20 years because they're never gonna relent on him.
Oh yeah.
If Roman is any example. But yeah, they immediately showed him to be a big deal, and they made his whole running around the ring, doing his spear, 23 miles, whatever nonsense, a big deal. That was going viral. That's literally what they hinged his whole
Yeah.
existence on. And,
Yeah.
to a certain degree, it has worked. Um,
hmm
for a good chunk of the fan base, they're behind it, and good for them. Uh, but just looking at those two alone, and they both got called up at the same time. Looking at those two alone, you see the difference in what you were saying of like how someone is booked and then the reactions they get, and then
Hmm.
therefore what WWE continues to do with them.
It it's just like if you're gonna call up these wrestlers, you need to have a plan. And the
Yes.
criticism of Vince was they were called up and there was no plan
Yeah.
because he saw a toy and was like, oh, I want that one. And the thought was, okay, Triple H knows what that's like. Best mates with Shawn Michaels as well. I'm sure they talk,
Yeah.
but seemingly they don't have the plan. Shawn Michaels generally does do well at booking the wrestlers like farewell
Yeah.
compared to like what it was in Black and Gold, where it was usually they lose the title and then you never see them again, and they pop up on Raw or SmackDown like a couple months later, maybe
Right.
a couple of days later as well. But it just seems like even though they have the time to like book their time at NXT coming to an end, they just don't do really anything on main roster. And if you're cutting people to put to bring these people up, surely you have a thought out reason to be like, okay, I've cut these people because I want to put time on this person. But clearly, Carmelo, they didn't do that. And again, it's like what I'm worried they're going to do with Julia, where it's like, okay, I guess she's in the Money in the Bank qualifier, but where does it go from there?
Right. Yeah. It definitely comes off incredibly exploitive of these
Hmm.
wrestlers who, unfortunately, even though there is competition, WWE is still the big company. It's the main
Hmm.
company. And even with other companies, most people grew up on WWE, so that's the dream.
Yeah.
And so they're sold this dream and they're even given like the opportunity in some regard, in some respect,
Hmm.
right? But then they're not truly given the opportunity.
Exactly.
But WWE banks on them wanting to be part of their brand more than anything. That they're like, well, of course they're happy because we called them up and we're featuring them with like a match where they're, just there to serve someone else's story.
And like you said, exploiting them. Again, these guys aren't employees.
Yeah,
They are independent contractors because the Hulk Hogan, you son of a, you know, they aren't employees. So, WWE doesn't really need to do anything for them. I believe in WWE, all the wrestlers still do booking their own travel and everything.
I don't
So
know about that for sure.
maybe for like international things, I think WWE does it, but I think within the States, the wrestlers sort out their travel.
I actually don't know.
So yeah, so it's like you're making these people do all of these things for maybe the opportunity they're gonna even be on TV, let alone winning titles and having s- ice cream bars and whatnot.
Right.
So it feels like they are playing this like game of like they're dangling the carrot in front of them, being like, you will get it, you'll maybe get it, you'll maybe get it.
Yeah.
It feels icky.
Yeah. Yeah, it's upsetting and it's frustrating and it's gross, honestly, just the way
Hmm.
they behave with their wrestlers. Um, because there have been so many call-ups since NXT really became
Hmm.
a thing, in the form that we know it as. And like, I would argue probably 60 or 70% of them haven't gone well.
I
Some
agree.
have been like, okay, middle of the road. And then there's a
Hmm.
very few that have been like super successful or even successful. But like a lot of them are like just missed opportunities.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to go through all of them, but like
Hmm.
we can name a couple. There's what's it called? Andrade is probably one of the
Yeah.
biggest ones.
Yeah.
Rusev as well, and those are two guys I thought were super talented, could be great like upper mid card.
Hmm.
Maybe reach main event status for like just for being a challenger, a contender, win the championship once.
Jey Uso title winners.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Big E before he got into the New Day was just
Yeah.
meandering in the mid card the
Yeah.
whole time.
I think the biggest one is Shinsuke,
Yes.
where it was like the man was NXT, and then obviously this is less so on the current regime. Obviously, is
Yeah.
more of a Vince thing, but like they brought him up, and they were like, you can feud with the Miz, I guess,
Yeah.
and then you can win the Rumble, lose to AJ in like an okay match,
Yeah.
and then your gimmick is low blows.
Right. Yeah. I think Shinsuke and Finn are probably the two
Yeah.
biggest ones, right? And because those two came in with huge fanfare, like
Mm.
he got his violin entrance as his like SmackDown
Yeah.
intro for the first time, you know?
I mean, he's such a big deal. He was one of the first people to keep their names
Yeah.
from before WWE into NXT and then onto main. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, he is a big deal in the history of wrestling, and even Triple H just can't find a way to book him. And I like it's getting harder and harder because he's getting older and older.
Right.
Where, at this point, I don't think he's ever going to win a world title. I won't be surprised if he leaves at the end of his current contract because unless he's like, whatever, man, give me a big payday and I can do some more surfing. If he wants to do that, respect, whatever, that's fine. Love that for him.
Yeah.
But at least do something with him.
Right. Like there's value to someone like Shinsuke with the name he has. Um, and also like I get the whole age argument, but you also can do it, right?
Goldberg's
Like
gonna come back this year.
I was gonna say, I was literally just thinking, I was like, Goldberg won the championship at like the age of what, 50 something he was?
Yeah.
Like you can very easily do it if they care. And if they care about someone, time and time again we see it that they will literally go to the most extreme lengths.
Hmm.
That person gets injured, oh, we'll just leave the title on him and yeah, that's fine. He just doesn't have
Yeah.
to defend it. Whereas like other people get the title stripped from them because they get injured. And I'm just like,
Hmm.
you actively choose who you want to keep on top. And it like,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I guess that's the name of the game, but it's like frustrating when they're not consistent with it, you
Yeah.
know? And again, it just feels like you're treating these characters and these wrestlers, I should say, these people like pieces on a chessboard. And it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, like this person got taken out because of an injury, so we just moved it. We just add this new piece. Oh, we just
Yeah.
move this piece here. Oh, we just do this. There's just no real thought, it feels like, given to the wrestlers. Like
Mhm.
I know Bailey was on a interview with I think Chris Van Vliet
Yes.
recently, and she was talking about like she's done all these pitches for ideas,
Yeah.
and just they don't do them. And it's like, why would you not listen to your wrestler in any
Exactly.
shape or form?
And like I get if you say to her, I love the idea, not really what we're looking for right now, but then work with her on it, be like, this is how we can maybe implement it. Why don't you workshop it a little bit and come back to me? But instead they're like, no. And it's
Right.
just like I think it's more egregious with the women as well because they
Yeah.
get such little time when you've got someone actually coming to you being like, I've got all these ideas. I mean, it reminds me of CM Punk when they got rid of him, where or maybe it was the summer of Punk actually, where he went off and wrote like 2 years worth of TV. But it's just like,
I don't
I can't
remember.
remember if that was what inspired the summer of Punk or it was where Vince was like, you're fired. I can't remember which way around it was.
No, that might have actually been. I mean, maybe there are multiple stories, but I remember. I think he did it for. Was it the Straight Edge Society?
Oh, maybe it was.
Yeah, but I remember him saying in his thing, his DVD, like this was years back when they released a DVD for him,
Mhm.
and he said like, yeah, I just like wrote like a
Mhm.
hundred pages or something and threw it on Vince's desk. I don't know
Yeah.
if he even read it, but like he was like, okay.
Yeah. But
So
like, yeah, people are doing these things and instead of working with them to figure it out, they're ignoring them. And I think that it's because they're not their employees. where they don't feel like they need to actually treat these people properly. They're like they're like you've said, they're expendable,
Right.
fortunately. And like you said, there's certain wrestlers who they'll see aren't expendable and they'll drop everything for them. So, your Braun Breaker hatred, as an
Yeah.
example. You got other wrestlers like, and this isn't a knock against the wrestlers themselves either. It's
Yeah.
not, it's not their fault the company decides to drop everything for them.
Right.
Maybe Tiffany, for example, where we're like, I don't know if you still believe this, but Tiffany isn't like the biggest person on SmackDown. Like
No, not
the
by a long
actual
shot.
person who should be holding that title. But, the Tiffy time thing got over. She's clearly very athletic, so that's awesome. And so they were like, let's run with that
Well, she's
instead of,
also a blonde white woman.
yeah, yeah, true, true. Uh, Wanted to dance around that one, but you're right.
I don't dance around it.
Um, but instead of booking, I don't know, Bianca, who is your biggest person there, I know we disagree on our the Naomi thing, but like Naomi actually has like more of a personality at the moment
Oh yeah.
when it comes to the booking. Even Nia, who it was like made the title feel big,
Hmm.
you know, and it's kind of getting lost in the wayside at the moment.
Yeah, I honestly had to think who is the women's champion on SmackDown. I just I forgot about Tiffany because like and they've that's the thing. It goes back to what we were saying. Like she got really over with the Tiffy time thing, so they called her up, and then they
Yeah,
just kind of relied on her being over by that premise
yeah,
alone, like and her athleticism. And they're like, okay, that's it. We don't need to do anything. We don't need to give
yeah,
her interesting stories. I mean, they were, I guess, attempting with the like Money in the Bank and Nia Jax, but it really wasn't that
yeah,
compelling.
yeah.
But
And I think the Charlotte thing also, Charlotte was meant to be the face
yeah,
in that feud. Which also I think goes to like their terrible marketing where, hey, how do we make someone a face? Put them on a yacht. And whilst you've got Americans who can't make ends meet, guys who are already spending God knows how much just to watch our shows,
yeah.
let's put them on a yacht.
Well, not just that, but like honestly, I feel like most people you give the Money in the Bank briefcase to, you kind of set them up on a course to turn face if they're a heel.
Yeah, I
Not
think unless
everyone, but
it depends on who they cash in on.
right. But I'm just saying, in the last few years, like you've mostly given it to people that are somewhat over. And
Hmm.
if they're already over to a certain
Yeah,
degree,
yeah,
them
I know what
cashing
you mean.
in, unless it's on the biggest, like the most over person, like it's gonna result in people cheering and cheering them. And so it's like,
Yeah.
you did that, and then you tried to pitch Charlotte as the baby face, even though you knew Tiffany was over. It's like the whole reason you called her up and did the Tiffy time
Yeah.
thing. Like it just makes no sense. And it shows kind of their lack of forward thinking.
Hmm.
And again, just viewing these wrestlers, these people, I should always say people, as just commodities versus
Hmm.
like human beings that like genuinely care about this art form that
Yeah.
they're in and
Yeah.
want to make it the best they can. Because when you listen to a lot of people, most wrestlers talk about what they're doing, the work they do, they're very
Hmm.
passionate about it.
Yeah.
So they're not just there to collect a check. They're not just there to, you know, seem impressive. They want to tell an interesting story. They want to captivate their audience, and they're not given the opportunity to, you know.
Yeah.
Like another example of what you were saying is Becky, right?
Mm.
Because now she's super over, and so now they bring her back, and now they make the Intercontinental title matter by having
Hmm.
Lyra feud with her. Whereas like Lyra had nothing to do for the past
Yeah.
3 months or whatever that she's had the title. And it's like, oh, only because you care about Becky are you going to make Lyra matter versus like
Yeah.
just actually having her matter by having people feud and having important stories with her. But no, we're just gonna wait till we have a certain wrestler.
They also have so much time. They have, excluding NXT, they have 6 hours of TV time, plus all the social media time ever.
Yes.
Like if non-stop social media time they have. They could air their dark matches afterwards on social media if they really wanted to. If they wanted to, like Karrion Cross had a dark match. This man is your number one shirt seller right now, and you're not putting him on television. And again, is that a story? I don't know. Conflicting reporting on apparently what Karrion Cross is doing is just himself
Mm,
at the moment, and it's like this dude is so over, and you refuse to give him anything.
yeah.
Like, this guy clearly cares about being a wrestler. You can tell from the way he talks about it. He just wants to go out there, wrestle, and entertain. And they're making bank off his t-shirts. And it's like, cool. Thanks for the income, lad.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
absurd.
well to your point, as far as I know, the wrestlers don't get a lot of the
No.
royalties. I don't know if they get, I think they get some, but
I believe Jey Uso said it's like a bucket where it has to hit a certain amount, and then once it gets over that amount, then they start getting a cut from
it's stupid.
the merch. But this was a few years ago, so I'm
Right.
not sure if that's still the case. But I remember him saying that in an interview where, like, once the bucket fills, after it overflows, they start making some money off the merch. And again, that
Mm,
also might be a thing depending on the wrestlers as well. Because I'm thinking John Cena is probably like, that's nice. I'm taking a cut from the start. Same thing with someone like Cody, but someone like Karrion Cross or someone like, I don't know, Chad Gable even probably isn't on those nice deals.
right. Oh yeah, yeah. Definitely the bigger the name you are, the more of a cut you get.
Hmm.
Um, but even still, it's probably not, so for the average wrestler, it's probably not a
Hmm.
lot.
Yeah.
And that's just it's just messed up. It's like they're
Yeah.
making you so much money with this merch. Like merch is their number one way I feel of, or I guess it's tied with ticket sales, but like
Yeah.
I think merch it's one of the biggest ways they make money, as a
Hmm.
company. And so you're literally using that, and I know they have the rights, but like you're using that
Hmm.
person's face, likeness, image,
Yeah.
their their branding, whatever you want to call it, to make all this money, and they're
Yeah.
not even getting like a significant portion of that amount.
And also, this is sort of tangential, like the ways the wrestlers are making money are basically getting smaller and smaller. And like the NXT, because we're talking about NXT here, the NXT people are already not making anything. They're
Yeah,
making like 40 grand USD, which is nothing, especially living in Florida.
yeah,
And then they get to Maine, they're not getting much in terms of t-shirt sales, or whatever merch sales.
right.
They no longer get a cut from the pay-per-views because I remember a big thing was people were desperate to be on pay-per-views because they'd get a cut of the gate,
Mm,
and a cut of the pay-per-view buys. Sorry, but
dang.
that's not a thing anymore because you're on Netflix and Peacock, which we know from the rest of the media industry means you make no money off of it.
Yeah,
So the wrestlers are getting less and less money from WWE, and they are getting less and less opportunity, even if they go through developmental as well.
right. Yeah. And another thing is the call-ups, I feel also are a way to uh for the company to make more profits, right? Because
Hmm.
you can offer the NXT people less than
Yeah.
someone who's been on the in the company for 8 years. Like Braun Strowman was probably making a good amount of money.
Hmm.
He's been there and he's been a main eventer, he's held the championship, he's been featured in like, so he's probably, has a pretty high paying contract, and they feel like, oh well, we're not using you for much, so let's cut you. And that honestly is probably worth two NXT contracts.
I believe they lowballed Stephanie.
Yeah,
And I
probably.
guess for her, she was like, well, I guess I want to improve my English, so I'll go to NXT. But you lowballed her. She's probably worth more than the NXT contract, significantly more than the NXT contract.
Yeah, yeah. It's really absurd. Their scummy business practices.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which, but yeah, I feel like there's such a small window of opportunity for NXT wrestlers to be successful.
yeah,
And the ones that have been, I think, have done it through just the sheer force of will of themselves,
yeah,
which is
yeah.
not how a business should work.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Seth, but Seth did have the backing of the company.
Yeah,
Seth is probably the biggest. Like, I know people probably argue Roman, um, but he was in NXT for like 2 weeks, I think.
yeah,
At least like on TV. He wasn't on TV
yeah.
very long.
No.
Um, but Seth and Roman are probably the biggest successes that you've seen from NXT.
And Seth is a success because they wanted to make Roman a success.
Yeah,
They were like, we have to build this guy so I can get The Rock's cousin over. I'll do it by hook or by crook.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say that like Seth is the Orton to Roman Cena.
Yeah,
Like Orton has always been like just a peg under Cena in terms of
yeah.
like his status. And so that's kind of Seth too. But yeah, I mean, I think a fun way to kind of wrap up this conversation is who do you see as the potential future stars from NXT right now? So like anybody
Uh,
that's been called up already is out of the conversation.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
I think for the women, it's easy. It's
Yeah.
Stephanie, Jordan Grace.
Ooh.
For the men, Obafemi. Big
Yeah.
fan of Obafemi. Trick, I'm like hesitant on because I'm scared they'll do the Carmelo thing to Trick. Because the WWE doesn't treat. And I mean, the same thing with Obafemi. WWE doesn't treat black men very well. So
Yeah.
I'm where I think they are both the biggest stars. I am still worried. Like Javon as well, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah. I think Oba, it'll be hard to deny just because of how his size.
Yeah.
Um, Trick, I think he'll have an uphill battle.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think they'll want to push him,
Mm.
but I don't know if he'll translate because, and this is no hate to Trick, but he's not the best wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I personally like have not been too invested in his matches as of late.
Mm.
So I'm not saying he can't put on a good match. Like his
Yeah.
stuff with Ilya is really great, but I feel like that's a lot of Ilya carrying the weight because
Mm.
you put anybody with Ilya and it's hard to have a
Yeah.
bad match. That man is uh, I cannot praise Ilya enough. So Trick will be interesting. I kind of think he might just end up with Carmelo once he gets called up for a while. I know it's frustrating, but
D- Actually, you know who's the biggest opportunity? And it's not even an NXT wrestler, it's Joe Hendry. They, for some reason, like I don't mind Joe Hendry.
yeah.
It's also I'm biased because he's a British guy. I watched him when he was at What Culture Pro Wrestling.
Ooh,
Like, but it just feels like they're like, oh my God, we've got a white dude who's got a meme. Let's go.
right.
Push him to the moon.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely see him, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he was like just kept as like an R-Truth style kind of concept, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
Um, yeah, I mean, those are the three names that are featured right now. It's hard for me to see anybody else necessarily that I can think of in terms of the men.
yeah, the men's
Stephanie,
division is rough.
yeah, yeah, Stephanie definitely makes sense. Um, who else is in the women's division that they just,
Jordan
yeah,
Grace. Is
Jordan
Lash
Grace.
Legend still in NXT?
She hasn't been on TV for a while,
Yeah, which
but
is weird because they pushed her a lot.
yeah. Um,
Um,
I could see them trying to push Jada Parker.
mhm.
I don't know if she's like, I don't know if she has the potential to be like a top star. I think she could be like in the division and stuff, but I could see them pushing her,
They should
you
take
know.
away her Twitter
Why?
as well. I'm not gonna say anything just because I'm not 100% sure I'm talking about the right person though,
Okay.
but I'm pretty sure I am.
Yeah. Yeah,
But yeah,
with the recent call-ups, it's also like, oh, those would be some of the people maybe I would have
yeah,
said, like I will say I do think they're gonna push Roxanne really hard.
yes, yeah.
So
They'll push Roxanne hard. I'm hoping like Julia gets a push. I mean, give her the money in the bank and get her to take it off Tiffany.
yeah, I mean, could be
Con
fun. They could do that with Julia and
continue the
Io,
cycle.
or do it in
Yeah,
Julia and Io,
true, true.
right? Yeah. So, but who do you think will be the future stars of WWE from NXT currently? Who were some of your biggest like disappointments in the past history of NXT call-ups? Let us know in the comments. Sully, where can everybody find you?
You can find me at Kayfabe Crimes everywhere. That's Kayfabe Crimes with a K.
And you can find me at Nav the Poet, NAV the Poet, no spaces or underscores. And you can find our podcast on YouTube, The Big Pop Podcast, and on Instagram and TikTok at The Big Pop Pod. And until next time, take care.
Bye.